Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Neil Hamilton. Let me introduce Neil Hamilton first to you. And he's a member of the Senate, which is like a local Westminster, could I say? Member of the Senate for Mid and West Wales since 2016. He has been leader of UKiP Wales since 26th of September 2016. In September last year, Neil Hamilton was named the interim leader of UKiP. Welcome, sir.
Well, I'm delighted to be with you.
So, mainly, my program is directed to the Polish viewers. I'm in North Wales, Wrexham, a 60-odd thousand population, and they say like roughly 10,000 out of it is Polish population, so quite high percentage. If you could tell us, please, Neil, first, as I said, you're member of Senate. Please tell us what powers does Senate have, devolved from Westminster? I know I think education, health. Is there anything else? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, health is the main one. That's 50% of the Welsh government's budget. Education is the next biggest. That's 25%, and then 25% is divided amongst other things like transport and roads and all the other nonsense things that government does as well. Agriculture and environment are now devolved issues as well since Britain left the European Union. Some more powers have been devolved to Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's not that they've been devolved now, it's just that they were the responsibility of the European Union before, instead of the devolved institutions in Britain. We can raise taxes or lower taxes as well. We have the right to change the rates of income tax that are imposed on the UK by 10% either way. Those powers have not been used as yet. And various other smaller taxes, like the tax on property sales, are devolved to Wales as well. And the Welsh Parliament was created only 20 years ago, so it's developing. But UKiP actually thinks that these devolved parliaments are a threat to the integrity of the United Kingdom. And we want to reverse the devolution process, or go beyond it, actually, because we think that governments should not be controlling the health service in Britain, for example. We think the health service itself should be democratized. And the people who run the health service, the bureaucrats, should be answerable to the people elected from the area that they cover. So we have a radical policy which is very different from any other party in the UK on a great many issues, and that's one of them.
That was one of my future questions. Next question is, but you just mentioned it. So especially now, because of all the hysteria and the COVID hysteria, you can see that all parts of UK are drifting away from each other, like Scotland, Wales, and England. So you just mentioned, just elaborate. You think is all this situation now is a threat to like integrity of United Kingdom as well?
Well, of course, the COVID regulations are a threat to much more than that. They're actually a threat to the liberties of the people, which are quite unprecedented in peacetime. There was nothing like the restrictions on movement and what you can do as a private individual during the Second World War. We can't go out to a restaurant or to a pub. We can't engage in sport or leisure pursuits. I mean, it's incredible. We might as well be living in North Korea in many respects. And Kim Jong-un would feel quite at home in modern Britain with the role that the state has given itself in the last year. And the government always finds an excuse to continue these regulations. The justification changes over time seamlessly. It remains to be seen how much of this overload of state control is relaxed in due course. It may be relaxed in certain respects, but some parts may end up being permanent.
You mentioned North Korea, but trust me, I lived in 1980s in Poland during the martial law. It was 1981. And the 13th of December, the government announced like martial law, but they didn't lie. They say until the Christmas, which was like roughly 2 weeks to flatten the curve. It was like a proper curfew. Everybody stays home. Do not leave your house. But then from 1st of January, it was relaxed. You could go to the pub. You could go to the restaurant. Obviously, there was lots of restrictions, but trust me, it was easier to live than here in UK now. So when it started last March, I was really scared. I saw what's going on. I saw what's coming. And I knew straight away, since in many newspapers, it was said that it may last up to 2 years. So I was sure it's going to last minimum of 2 years, all the restrictions. We'll see how it goes later.
If you'd come directly from Poland to Wales, you'd feel quite at home in Wales now, because we have a one-party state in Wales as well. We've always had a Labour government. It's always propped up by the opposition party, so-called the Welsh nationalist, Plaid Cymru. They're a socialist party as well. And the Conservative Party in Wales is too timid to oppose most of the things that the Welsh government does. So effectively, all the parties, just as in the 1980s in all communist countries in Eastern Europe, you had a multiplicity of parties, but actually they were all communist parties and under different names. And so in Wales, and indeed the United Kingdom generally, to a greater or lesser extent, we have exactly the same syndrome. And UKiP is the anti-establishment party, which represents the interests of ordinary people, whom the big parties forget, which is why we had Brexit, of course. All the big parties for the last 40 years have supported membership of the European Union. And UKiP was the David with the slingshot who felled Goliath. So that's the role that I still see for UKiP after Brexit, is to be the radical anti-establishment party, but in a domestic British context in future.
And I hope mostly it will be more like anti-socialist party, like more libertarian and free market party, because I've seen your interview, your little podcast with Godfrey Bloom, and yeah, I loved it, because, you know, I could see both of you agree to many things. So yeah, basically free market and liberty, personal liberty. That's why I'm happy, because UKiP, you remember, was always smeared in the TVs, in the papers, as a racist, one issue party, Brexit, and only Brexit, nothing else, which is obviously a lie. I know about it. Obviously, you did have lots of socialist ideas in your program then, but I know why. I know how the parties work. There is and Nigel Farage himself, I believe, he's like half socialist, so that's why the reason was. So I didn't really. Once Godfrey Bloom was sacked from UKiP, I stopped really following UKiP. I didn't like it anymore. I was really, really angry with Nigel Farage that he sacked Godfrey Bloom from UKiP. Tell me, please, since you're there in Senate, you see those people, you see those AMs, they called, right? You call
assembly members.
Yeah, assembly members. Yeah,
we've recently changed the name of the institution. It was the National Assembly for Wales. Now it's grandiosely called itself the Welsh Parliament, or the Senedd, which is the Welsh word that sounds like Senate.
Yeah,
but it's come to be known as the Senedd now. I think that's what will be the usual word that people will associate with it. So yeah, our slogan in the next election will be "Scrap the Senedd."
What I was gonna say, yeah. So since you're there, you see those, you meet those people. You know, First Minister Mark Drakeford, and please tell me if I'm right in my opinion. All the my generation, your generation will remember a film. American film, Beverly Hills Cop, and it was two police officers living in the town. Their job was boring. They were called occasionally to maybe remove the cat from the tree, or maybe there was a stolen bike. And then Beverly Hills Cop came in and showed them, listen, to be proper cop, you have to bend the rules, you have to break the law. Sometimes you have to break someone's nose. And that's how I see the advisors of Mark Drakeford. And he's the guy who just likes now, that's the life, I can tell people what to do. He enjoys, you can tell he enjoys it, like keeping people in the houses, like his life completely changed. And he's never gonna let it go. It looks like he just wanna keep us in like permanent lockdown and tell us little things. You can go there, you cannot go there. Am I right in my opinion, or is he dangerous person who wants to, like, himself is dangerous?
Well, the Labour Party in Wales, just as everywhere else in the United Kingdom, but especially in Wales because they've been in power in Wales for 20 years, thinks that it knows best for everybody. It knows how they should live, what they should eat, how they should travel. The ideal for the Welsh Labour Party is that everybody will be born in a state hospital, will be educated in a state school, they'll live in a state house, and they'll work for the state. So their job will be paid for by the taxpayer. And all this will cost enormous amount of money. So they'll pay you on the one hand and take it back through taxes on the other. And this is exactly the theory which underlay the communist state, of course. And so the people in charge live a completely different kind of lifestyle from the people that they supposedly represent, of course, because they are on the gravy train, hopefully for life, and they parcel out jobs to their political friends. And Wales is a thoroughly corrupt country in terms of political appointments. We have commissions for this, that, and the other, and all sorts of third sector so-called organizations, which are in theory charities, but actually they're agents of the government. And in order to get appointed to any remunerative post in these organizations, you have to be a supporter of what the Labour Party believes in. So you might as well, as we started this conversation out, be in Eastern Europe as it was before the 1990s. Just as Eastern Europe has gone one way, in the West, we've been going the other way. And my job as the leader of UKiP is to smash that consensus and to restore the people's liberties. We are a small state libertarian party. That's what our constitution says. And that's what I want to make UKiP live up to.
See, that's what you said, because Western people here, they never lived under the communism. They just heard about it and just they think it's just some kind of paradise. But we did live there, and we know it's not a paradise at all. There's no liberties at all. Everyone's equally poor. And that's because we know that. I don't know if you're aware, in UK today was announced like great reopening day. I don't think many businesses gonna open, but I just let you know what's happening in Poland from the 1st of January. Almost like 20,000 businesses are open. Obviously, we know how to go around the law. For example, restaurants and pubs are open because you cannot open a restaurant, but you can make a movie in Poland, because they still make movies in UK and everywhere. So there is a camera. The chief says, first action. People eat their food, drink their drinks. Police is coming. We're just drawing a movie. We're just making a movie. Sorry, mate. Just go away. There's many, many ways. Or the wine bars, they would hire all customers as a tasters. They come in, they taste the wine, and obviously they have to pay because there's a school like lesson of tasting the wine. So that's what we do. And 20,000 businesses are already open, and every day more are opening. Do you think is it going to happen? Because some businesses announced they're going to reopen today. Do you think it's going to happen here?
Well, I think businesses are going to find it very difficult to operate commercially in the current legislative lockdown framework. And the government has deliberately created an atmosphere of hysteria over this COVID so-called pandemic. The statistics are wholly unreliable, in fact, have been devised in such a way as to be meaningless, because we don't know how many people have actually died from COVID. Because if you go into hospital and you pick up the virus in the hospital, you can die of the condition for which you were admitted. Say you had heart trouble, but COVID will be on your death certificate as well if you have another heart attack in the hospital. Similarly, if you get to COVID and you're killed in a car crash, you're still a COVID victim. So we don't actually know how serious this so-called pandemic has been. And the government wants us to be in ignorance, of course, because that's the justification then to continue the lockdown, state control, and all that goes with it. The increased powers of the police to interfere in people's private lives, as we used to think them, anyway, private lives, and so on. In the course of my lifetime, I've never seen such a power grab by government as we've endured in the last year. And the most disturbing thing of all about this is the timidity of the British people and the way in which they've simply allowed this to happen without protest, by and large. It's a bit like taking candy from a baby, as it's proved to be. Why people are so heedless of their liberties and the invasions of state power, I simply cannot explain. Obviously, there are people like me who take a different view, but from all the opinion polls, it seems that 2/3 of the population are quite happy with the situation that we've got at the minute, or at least if they're not happy, they think that it's inevitable and it's the right thing to do. Maybe in due course, they will get tired of it. But at the moment, I think it'd be very difficult for businesses to operate because people are now into the kind of mindset whereby they're controlling themselves because of the fears which government has created. So this excess of government control has two factors. First of all, there are the laws that they've passed to compel people to do or not do things. But secondly, there's this atmosphere of fear and hysteria whereby the people are programmed to do what the state wants without actually having to obey any specific law. So this is foretold, of course, in George Orwell's novel 1984, where the people are kept in a permanent state of fear by the government and incessant wars. Well, we're not fighting a war in the conventional sense, but we're fighting a war against a virus, and it's the same thing as far as government is concerned. So it's been a massive invasion of liberty, and it's got to be opposed and reversed. And I hope eventually we will find that the people will wake up from the nightmare that's been imposed upon us.
Yeah, invisible enemy. That was brilliant. They made up this phrase and people just believe it. The people believe in some kind of invisible enemy. Like you said, in 1984, there was some East Asia and we were always in the war with East Asia. Now, nobody saw the war. Sometimes some like people captured by the army, but yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah. Oh, a bit scary, but like I said, we've been through this in 1980s and we got out of it. So I'm still have a hope. I have a hope that we're gonna get out of this time.
Yeah.
But let's come back for a second, one more time to the Welsh elections. First of all, do you think, or are you sure they will take part in May? Because they were talking about moving them up to September, I believe. Is it May? Is it set the date now?
Yeah, well, the election must take place on the 6th of May, unless there are new powers that have been introduced just last week to delay the election if this COVID pandemic continues at the minute. But I think that it's very likely that those powers will not be used and the elections will take place on the 6th of May. Because as a result of the increased profile which COVID has given to Mark Drakeford, who's the First Minister of Wales, 6 months ago he was unknown in Wales, now he's unknown throughout the United Kingdom. As a result of being on television, making these announcements related to COVID, I think that the Labour Party will decide whether to have the elections entirely on what's best for them. How many seats are they likely to win in the election? Are they going to get a majority or not? The minute they don't have a majority of their own, they're one seat short. And the so-called Liberal Party in Wales has one member. She joined the government immediately after she was elected as a Liberal in a constituency where 92% of her constituents voted for parties other than the Labour Party. Now that's the way politics works in Wales. 8% of the people of her constituency voted Labour, but they've now effectively got a Labour member of the Senedd. So Labour will want to win the election outright in May, and I think they'll calculate that they can. It's anyone's guess if that will happen, but I think they'll probably calculate they have a better chance of winning more seats in May than later in the year. So I'm expecting the election to go ahead in May, but it's possible that it won't.
Okay, and there's another change because from last year, because the election is supposed to take place last year, but because of COVID, it moved to this year. For the first time in Wales, people the age of 16 can vote, and anyone who lives in Wales without the UK like British nationality, right? Am I right? It's like everyone, whoever comes into UK to Wales now pays his council tax, can take part in elections, right?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a resident in Wales, you don't have to be a British citizen in order to vote in Welsh elections anymore. This is the Labour Party gerrymandering the electoral system. Young people are more likely to vote for the Labour Party than older people, because of course people grow up, they become more mature, they have an experience of life, and so they discover that socialism and the nirvana that it promises is a fantasy. And so, as with Brexit, an overwhelming majority of young people were against Brexit, whereas an overwhelming majority of older people were in favour of it. So Labour has calculated that reducing the voting age from 18 to 16 will mean more votes for them. And that I think they've made the same calculation about foreigners voting as well, because the Labour Party is now overwhelmingly dependent upon the votes of racial minorities in the United Kingdom. Lots of Labour MPs now represent areas with very high levels of immigration. In London now, Greater London, more than half the people living in London were born outside the United Kingdom. We've had a vast immigration in the last 20 years. We've added 10 million people to our 65 million population in the last 20 years from immigration alone. And Labour calculates that they're more likely to vote for them than for other parties. They also wanted to give prisoners the vote, although that proved to be too difficult for them politically. I have no idea whether prisoners are more likely to vote Labour than for any other party, but the only calculation for the Labour Party is, can we change the electoral system to benefit us? So I don't know if you're a British citizen, Sebastian, but if you're not and a Polish national, then you would be able to vote in Wales in May. So even if you weren't a British citizen.
Yeah, I am British citizen as well. I'm Polish and British citizen. And like you said, it is frustrating because I'm 15 years in UK, so I know a little bit about UK politics now, and it's frustrating when people come in like 3 months earlier and they have right to vote. They don't know much about local politics. They don't know much about politics at all. No. But since that's the case in Wales, let's hope, because it's a big Polish community and Eastern European community in Wales. So hopefully there'll be more pro-freedom, because most of us come in here to set up their own businesses. So hopefully, it's gonna, since that's the case, help libertarian cause.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. I think Poland is a wonderful country, and the Polish people are wonderful people. Over hundreds of years, you've been oppressed by your neighbors, invaded, absorbed, and the Polish people's national spirit could never be extinguished. And even half a century of communism wasn't able to do that either. And I think Poland is an inspiration to all of us in Britain. Everybody knows about the heroism of the Polish forces in the Second World War, and General Sikorski and all that. And there was a big Polish immigration into Britain after the war. And you're quite correct. Overwhelmingly, they tended to vote for the Conservative Party or some other so-called right-wing party within the British political spectrum. And I think that UKiP is the natural home for people who fled Poland in pursuit of freedom, like yourself.
Thank you for that, sir. So let's talk. You, as a UKiP member, your party, you fought for a referendum, which let's say we won, because I always wanted Great Britain out of EU, as not only for Britain, because I was always hoping there will be beginning of the end of European Union, so that Poland could be could get out of European Union eventually, or the whole project would collapse. Yeah. But since we have a Brexit now, let's say call it Brexit, you probably know much more than I do about it. Please tell us about a little bit, what do you know by now about the agreement, which is over 1,000 pages big, and what happened yesterday as well, that the EU tried to shut the border between Ireland and Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland.
Yeah. Well, the European Union is a kind of gangster state, really, and it doesn't regard itself as subject to the norms of decency or even law, for that matter. We have a political court, the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg, that is specifically charged with, in all its judgments, with pursuing the ultimate objective of the European Union, which is the creation of a unitary state covering the whole of Western Europe. So the judges are effectively political judges. And the withdrawal agreement is obnoxious in many respects. First of all, you mentioned Northern Ireland. I mean, Northern Ireland is effectively remaining inside the European Union because it's subject to all sorts of rules and regulations which are laid down by Brussels because of the Irish border. I wanted a no-deal Brexit because that was a clean break with the European Union. I didn't want to be subject to continuing rules and regulations and agreements with the Brussels bureaucracy, because I know that they will never play fairly and they will always seek their own advantage at the expense of Britain or any other country with whom they have an agreement. And during the last 4 years, the Irish border has been used as a weapon by the European Union to try to stop or undermine Brexit, claiming that if we had border controls to check goods passing from the Irish Republic into the United Kingdom, that would bring back Irish terrorism and so on. So the EU said that if we had Brexit, then the IRA would start up again. Yet they have no difficulty, by the stroke of a pen and without any warning, recreating the border to stop vaccines being exported from the south to the rest of the United Kingdom, only because their own absurd regulatory bureaucracy and timidity politically has prevented the development of a vaccine in the European Union. It's been a tale of woeful incompetence. And in order to disguise their failure, they've now had to effectively close the border to the export of vaccines from the Irish Republic to the north. It's the most glaring revelation of failure that you could possibly imagine, in my view. So that's one big fault in the withdrawal agreement. It is that we now have a border down the middle of the Irish Sea, which separates one part of the United Kingdom from the rest. That is a denial of sovereignty and a denial of the independence and the integrity of the United Kingdom. So that needs to be scrapped. The EU retains control of 3/4 of our fishing waters as well. So that's another shameful episode in the life of Boris Johnson's Conservative government, where our fishermen have been sold down the river, literally in this case. And instead of recovering control of our sovereign waters, the European Union can still hoover up the fish. So that's got to be scrapped as well. We don't know yet to what extent we are ever going to diverge from the rules that are laid down in Brussels, which businesses and individuals have to observe. whether it's on health and safety or the environment or all sorts of other pettifogging restrictions, the EU will say that if you diverge too far from the rules that we make, then we will impose tariffs upon your exports to us. Well, my answer to that is, well, good luck to you, because the European Union has a surplus in trade amounting to nearly £100 billion a year with the United Kingdom. They would be the losers in a trade war. So there are lots of things that are wrong with the withdrawal agreement, and we should, I think, unilaterally denounce it in due course and move to the same kind of relationship that other countries like the United States have with the European Union, where they trade on the same World Trade Organization rules as any other country in the world. And it's only when we get rid of the withdrawal agreement that we'll be able to say that Britain has truly left the European Union.
So that only says what you just said. It means the fight just begun. It's not finished, and that's why we need UKiP to rise up again and just finish what you started years ago.
Exactly. I mean, I've been fighting this battle for the whole of my political lifetime. I joined what was then called the Anti-Common Market League in 1967. That's 54 years ago, 6 years before Britain joined what was then the European Economic Community, known popularly as the Common Market. I opposed Britain going into the Common Market in the first place. I was a conservative in those days, and I spoke at the Conservative Party conference in 1971 in a 2-day debate on the Heath government's proposal to take Britain into the common market. I opposed it then, and I fought it in all the years since. I was a Conservative Member of Parliament for 14 years in the 1980s and 1990s. And indeed, I was even a member of the European Union Council of Ministers for a couple of years when I was a trade and industry minister in Britain. And I saw my role as a simple one, either to block the European Union from passing legislation, or to delay it as long as possible, or if I couldn't stop it ultimately, to ensure that no money was spent on it. So all my life, I have been in opposition to the federalizing project, which is the United States of Europe, which is what the European Union wants to impose, not just upon Britain, but on every single nation state, including Poland, in Europe. And that's why you're quite right. We have to smash the European Union in order to revive the nations of Europe and preserve the liberties of our peoples.
I wish you and UKiP all the best, and I urge Polish listeners, just follow Neil Hamilton on Twitter, Facebook, I believe. I will post links where the interview will be. And another thing is, the last thing is, Neil Hamilton is one of the handful people in Senate who fights for small businesses, for people like us, because the rest of AMs, their members, they want to keep us in permanent lockdown. So well done, sir, and thank you for fighting for small people like us.
Well, thank you very much for having me on this program today, and I hope we'll have lots more connections with Poland. I have cousins who've married Poles. My wife has a half Polish goddaughter, and we both think that Poland is a wonderful nation, and I long for the day when we have a Polexit to match our Brexit in Britain. So.
Be warned, Angela Merkel and other Macrons. Thank you, sir. Thanks for interview.